Oh, the old Michigan boy wants to go to Detroit, doesn't he? Ay, ay, ay. In this video, we are going to talk about how it just got even worse for the Detroit Red Wings. And no, I am not talking about their brutal 8-1 loss at the hands of the Florida Panthers yesterday. That's an entire other story. Instead, we gotta introduce the characters of this video's conversation topic. We're talking about former Vancouver Canuck and current Minnesota Wild franchise defenseman Quinn Hughes. And new reports that have just come out that straight up confirm how Hughes spoke to Yzerman himself and straight up told the Detroit Red Wings no. You see, this all comes to us from Keith Gave, a guy whom, if you're familiar with Detroit Red Wings history, you probably hold in significant regard. Gave is not only a former Detroit Red Wings reporter, but he's a guy who was tasked with a very important opportunity back in 1989. He ended up giving a message to Sergei Fedorov and Vladimir Konstantinov, leading them to defecting the Russian system and coming over to North America to play for the Detroit Red Wings. It was a crazy story. It was all done under wraps. It was a secret, and it worked. Keith Gave is a guy that I think a lot of folks in Detroit probably owe a significant chunk of the team's history to, so let's give the guy some respect. The reason we're talking about Quinn Hughes and Keith Gave is because of a tweet made by Cider da Colida, Dead Wings, on Twitter. They went out there and posted this earlier yesterday on the platform. Let me get this straight. Steve Yzerman wasn't willing to give up premium assets for 26-year-old Quinn Hughes, but was willing to give up a premium asset for 34-year-old Justin Falk, who has the same contract length with no guaranteed extension? It doesn't make sense. Now, obviously they're talking about the Justin Falk trade, and the question that they pose is, okay, why was Steve Yzerman willing to give up a first for Justin Falk when Quinn Hughes was also available and he couldn't have given up the assets to get that guy? Now, there is a very distinct differentiation we can make between the trade returns hypothetical for Quinn Hughes and what Justin Falk actually got sent over for. Justin Hall, Buchelnikov, a first and a third for Falk, whereas if Quinn Hughes was traded, it wouldn't have been a remotely equivalent trade. Cider the Collider said that's not the point of the post. To be fair, the ask for Hughes was Edvinsson. This user replies, that's fine. Now, here's the thing about that. You can get all ticked off at Steve Yzerman for not acquiring Quinn Hughes in a trade, that's fine. However, you're really discrediting what the Quinn Hughes angle of it all actually looked like. And that's what Keith Gave goes out there and responds to. He posted this in response on Twitter. You are misinformed, like many others. Steve Yzerman and Vancouver had agreed to a trade for Quinn Hughes. It was a done deal on the condition that Hughes agreed to a long-term deal with Detroit. Yzerman and Hughes spoke directly. Hughes declined. The Wings sure tried. Now that is an absolute bomb that I think we deserve to make a video about, because to hear that a trade was on the table, that it was already a done deal, that Rutherford and Yzerman ended up speaking about it. Rutherford, by the way, former Detroit Red Wing in his own heyday. The fact that these two were able to come to an agreement on the condition that Quinn Hughes would agree to a long-term deal with Detroit, honestly, I respect Stevie Y for going out there and putting that on the table. I understand that you can say, oh, well, Steve Yzerman is not enough of a risk taker because he wanted to make this deal only with the guarantee that Quinn would re-sign. Obviously, we know that sometimes when you take risks, you either get burned or you end up with very, very big wins. The Minnesota Wild did that. They acquired the guy without the guarantee that he would re-sign, and there are another few elements that we can talk about in regards to that. But for Detroit to have this specific condition on the table, only for Hughes and Yzerman to speak directly and Hughes to deny it, that's quite the story, isn't it? Now, for what it's worth, Keith's response here does have a little bit of back and forth. The amount of people questioning you is astonishing. Carlo replies, "Is there an actual source for this, Keith?" "Yup, me and my sources, who are impeccable. Of course, that's not good enough for you, but my condolences. It's not about what's good for me or anyone, it's about what's credible. You also said yourself most are misinformed. It would be a shame if this was also a misinformation piece, hence why I asked." Unlike a lot of other crap from so-called insiders who are clueless, this is not misinformation or disinformation. It comes from an unimpeachable source. Like it or not, I don't care. Carlo says, "I don't either." None of your business says trust me, cause look up Keith. If you knew his background, you would know he is definitely not misinformed. And I'd say that the guy with his resume and what he has done in the Detroit Red Wings zeitgeist in the past, this is a pretty significant figure when it comes to Red Wings lore and history, so I'd be very reluctant to say that, oh, this guy's misinformed. The amount of people questioning you is astonishing. But ultimately, I think this boils down to one of the other points that Quinn Hughes made ever since he was acquired by the Wild. Obviously, his biggest thing, according to Brock Besser, according to him himself, according to all of the Vancouver Canucks analysts and writers that were talking about the Quinn Hughes situation, the number one thing aside playing with his brothers is that he wants to win. He wants to win even more than he wants to play with Jack and Luke in New Jersey. And so when he got traded to Minnesota, one of the interesting things that he said right after the trade was announced and during his first press conference was that he really appreciated and respected Bill Guerin and the Wild for stepping up to the plate and taking the swing and acquiring the guy for all the stuff that he ended up going for. A first, Steve Bouya, Marco Rossi, Liam Ogren. Those are a lot of quality assets, and Quinn is like, yeah, I appreciate the fact that they went out there and acquired me because it proved they had the balls to do it. I think Elliot Friedman said it best, that there were really only two teams that actually, quote-unquote, had the balls to do it. It was Minnesota, obviously, because they got it done, and then the other team was New Jersey, who were in a similar bubble too, but the Devils did not end up acquiring Quinn Hughes because of some of the guys that ended up taking up spots on the team. They had a number of guys with trade protection, and they weren't able to move out the necessary monetary pieces to open up a Quinn Hughes conversation. But Detroit, all things considered, was not a team that had the balls to acquire a Quinn Hughes unless they got that guarantee that he would re-sign. And I appreciate that Keith is going out there and giving us this info because it really does speak to Steve Yzerman and his conservativeness of running the NHL team that is the Detroit Red Wings. We had spoken about this a ton over the past few years, but the guy doesn't really want to trade many draft picks, and when he does trade a draft pick, it's for a guy like Justin Falk. It's not really a big swing, and they didn't want to make any big significant trades without guaranteeing that the guy would come back, which, in Quinn's own words, is a reason for him to not really appreciate what's going on. He likes Minnesota, and he likes Bill Guerin because they took that risk. And the fact that Steve Yzerman was not willing to do that, I would not be surprised if that rubbed Quinn Hughes the wrong way. At the end of the day, Hughes directly rejected Yzerman to his face, or maybe on the phone, so on a phone call or whatever. At the end of the day, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about this report that Quinn Hughes directly rejected Steve Yzerman? Speaking verbally, Speaking man to man, the guy straight up said, "No, I do not want to do what you want me to do." Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.